Hello, I'm Lucy from In the Midst of Madness, and today is Time to Talk Day, and this is a day set up by the mental health charity Time to Change, where they want as many conversations as possible to happen about mental illness, because even though it's 2018, there is still way too many people who are too frightened and too embarrassed to talk about mental health, and it's got to change. So the aim of today is for everyone, healthy, unhealthy, etc., ill, not ill, to talk about mental illness, because there is way too much stigma surrounding these conditions and it needs to stop. And the whole point of it is to get these conversations started today and hope that they will then continue throughout the year. So I thought I'd have my conversation with you guys, because I'm at home on my own today, so I haven't got anybody to talk to about it, and so I thought I'd talk to all of you, because I think a lot of people can really struggle to know kind of what to say, and so I kind of wanted to give a few tips to kind of help start these conversations, because it can be really difficult to know where to start, and actually most of the time once you get started it's actually really easy, because I think the thing that a lot of people forget is that people with mental health problems excuse me, are completely normal. They're just like you, but they happen to be ill, and it's not, we're not aliens, we're not sort of other, we're just like you, and in some ways that can be really scary, because I think it kind of reminds people that anyone can become mentally ill. And a lot of people kind of prefer to put distance between themselves and something that they kind of fear, and mental illness is often feared. In some ways it's kind of right to fear it, because it can be very life-changing and very kind of destructive to what you want to do in your life, but there's also a lot of ways of kind of living your life to the full, and it might not be the life that you should have planned, but there are a lot of ways of making the best out of a really difficult situation, and it's so much better if people actually talk to us, because we're normal, we have the same hopes and dreams and fears, and many of us work or have children or all sorts of we just do normal things. And I think that's the really key thing to remember when you're having these conversations, is we're just like you, and we're just like we used to be before we were ill. We just sort of happen to be ill as well, but like people with sort of physical health problems don't suddenly stop being them just because they have the condition. They've got added stresses to try and deal with. They've got to go to doctor's appointments and have medication or physio or all of those kinds of things, but they're still the same person. And so we need to talk to them in the same way, and actually that's much the same with mental illness. I'm still the same person I was when I was at university or when I was at school or when I was working. I just also have severe anxiety on top of that, which makes a lot of day-to-day living very difficult, but I can still talk completely normally. I can have very kind of rational conversations with people. And it's really important for people to remember that. And so yeah, I think one of the key things is to remember that we are normal and just talk to us. One of the easiest ways of starting up a conversation about mental illness is to ask people how they are, but to actually mean it. I think, I don't know if this is sort of worldwide, but certainly in the UK where I'm from, we have this habit of, the first question you ask someone, the first thing you say to someone is, "Hello, how are you?" And no one's going to open up at that point. I don't, nobody does. Even when I'm talking to people who I know actually want to know how I am, if it's the first thing they ask me, I'm going to tell you I'm fine. I'm not even going to think about the response. My go-to response is, "I'm fine." And I can guarantee that almost anybody that says that they're fine is lying. And they're not trying to cover stuff up, they just don't want the first thing that comes out of their mouth when they see you to be, "Actually, I'm really struggling," or "Today's not a great day," or "I could really do with some help." They're not going to tell you that's the first thing in a conversation, because we've kind of been brought up to believe that that's rude and it's not what people want to hear, and a lot of the time it isn't what people want to hear. I've certainly been on the receiving end of seeing people, like, their face visibly drop when you say, actually I'm having a really bad day, because it's not what they want to hear. They want to hear that everything's great and lovely and that you're cured, and when that isn't the case, it's really difficult because you suddenly become very, very isolated, and it is a really isolating experience to have to lie every time someone asks you that question, for every time someone asks how you are, to kind of feel like you have to say that you're fine, and not be able to say that actually today's a really difficult day, because when you're physically ill you're kind of allowed to say that, but when you're mentally ill it's either dismissed or ignored, or you get a reaction like someone kind of being disappointed, or it can be even worse and you can get really horrible reactions like people telling you that actually how you're feeling isn't true, and they'll dismiss how you're feeling, or they'll tell you to try harder or to think positive, or oh well, at least you haven't got X, Y and Z wrong with you, and that's really hard, and so it puts off a lot of people who are mentally ill from having these conversations because we're frightened of the reaction we'll get. And mental illness is, I'm not going to lie, it's really difficult to deal with. It's kind of horrible to live through, but what makes it so much worse is being on your own through it, and not being able to talk about your fears or the side effects, because so many people don't understand that there are side effects to most of the treatments we're given, and we don't just necessarily get kind of instantly better. And so when you kind of tell people, oh I'm on this medication, they sort of light up and they're like, oh great, are you better yet? It's like, no. And actually those of you who've read my blog or seen my previous vlogs will know that I can't be on medication. It makes me really, really ill, and so I've not really had any positive effects with medication. And so I've often been on the receiving end of kind of telling people that I'm on meds, and then being really excited and sort of wondering how much better I am now, and me then having to sort of say, actually it's making me really ill. In fact, it's making me more ill than the condition was originally, and I'm really not sure what to do. And a lot of people panic and they think that you're trying to kind of go against doctor's advice. They think that you might be making it up. They don't believe that it can be that bad, because as a society we're taught that medicine makes you better. We teach kids that, and in many ways it's true. In many cases it is true. If you take painkillers for normal pain, it will usually go away or lessen, but actually with mental illness drugs that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it makes you worse before it makes you better, sometimes it has no effect, sometimes it makes you worse and just keeps making you worse, which was my experience, and then in some really lucky cases it makes you better. But we're all different, and I think a lot of people who aren't mentally ill or don't have the experience of that don't know that, and so they don't then know to ask about your experience on those meds. They just assume, and then it's really difficult to say, oh actually that's not my experience, I'm not having a great time on these meds, they're making me really sick, or they're making me really tired, or I feel like I'm drunk all the time, or I'm sleeping all the time, or I can't sleep, or I'm having nightmares, or I could go on. There are hundreds of side effects that you can get, and that can be really tricky. But I think one of the best things that you can do is to just be really open and to ask how people are and about their experience of things, and listen to that, because it's very, very rare that people will lie. It's very rare that they will make things up, because to be honest, mental illness is bad enough as it is. We don't need to make it up. We don't need to make up how bad it is. It's pretty rubbish. And I really can't think of any times where I've kind of exaggerated how bad it is. And so it's really crucial to listen and believe us, because mental illness really is very, very isolating. And as I say, trying to deal with that on top of then having to deal with people's reactions to it, or worrying about their judgment, or like what the worst things that can happen when you're talking to people is for them to not believe you. And that's one of the things that's caused me by far the most damage over the years. And it's really caused me to have a lot of confidence problems and self-esteem issues, because I used to have quite a lot of self-belief, and I knew that if I felt something it was true. And not being believed has really made me question myself and made me think, oh, maybe I do want to be ill. Maybe I am attention seeking, and these are all things I've been accused of. And they're all things that you need to be really careful not to do when talking to people about mental illness, because they are so damaging. And it really stops people trusting you and anybody else really, really quickly. So I think the biggest thing to remember when talking to people is to think, how would you want to be spoken to? And to realise that it's a really big thing for most of us to open up about these conditions. It's really personal, and we have a huge amount of worry about being judged or treated differently. And so those things are really important to kind of bear in mind. And on top of that, it's actually ask about people's experiences. If someone tells you they're on medication, ask them if it helps. Instead of just assuming it does, ask them how it is. You don't need to kind of pry, you don't need to ask what dose they're on, or how long they've been on it for, or when they're coming off it, because that's none of your business. But ask them if it helps, because I found it really difficult telling people I was on medication and them all just assuming that it was working and making me better, or that I was lying if I said it wasn't. And so my sort of go-to response when someone tells me that they're on medication is to ask if it helps, ask how they're finding it, and kind of go from there. And being asked those questions means that as mentally ill people, we know that you're kind of an ally, we know that you know what you're talking about, and that you're not going to just sit and judge us or tell us that we should be trying a new random diet, or thinking positively, or just powering through the anxiety that's got us on the floor having panic attacks, unable to move. And that's so important. Knowing that we have allies, knowing that we have people on our side is absolutely vital. And today is a day to start that, just by sharing this video or sharing some of the posts from Time to Change. They're posting them all day. Helps us to know. It always cheers me up when I see those posts shared by people on my friend list on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, because I know that that person cared enough and sort of believed in the message that they're sharing, even if it's not them opening up about their own struggles, or even if they don't have mental health problems. Just knowing that they felt able to share that post means a great deal, and it means that it's another person that I kind of don't have to sort of worry about being a bit more open in front of. So please do share whatever you like from my YouTube channel or from my blog or wherever else I post, if I've sort of expressed something that you want to be able to express to others, so that they know that you're a person they can confide in. And in terms of having these conversations, please don't expect someone to open up to you if the first question you've asked is how they are, because as you can see, I'm pretty open and I don't do that. My relatives all know that they have to ask me properly later on in the conversation, and that actually in my case, and probably a lot of others, we actually have to think about how we are, because I don't know the answer to that question. It's a running joke with my nana. She will ask me properly sort of later on in a visit or in a car journey or whatever, and I have to genuinely sit and think for a bit, because I don't think about how I am most of the time. I just sort of muddle through, and I just get on with stuff. I get on with living my life as well as I can, and keeping myself distracted from the symptoms. And so when someone asks how I am, and I just say I'm fine, and they go, no, how are you actually? How are you really doing? I don't know, and I have to think about it. And try and sort of think through the week and what I've been up to and whether bad things have happened or good things have happened and sort of how I've coped, and then give an answer. So please don't be alarmed if people do take a little while to respond, and yeah, sort of talk to them about it sort of later on in your conversation. Catch up about your lives and your news and your children or your jobs or any of those things, and then say, how are you actually doing? I really want to know how you actually are. And then they might open up, and if they don't, that's okay. It doesn't mean you've done it wrong, it means they're not ready, and that's fine. Today is not about making people talk. We have to be ready, and we have to feel safe, and that is just as much about us as sort of our environment. But yeah, just kind of bear with us, because it is a really tricky situation to be in, and a really difficult sort of conversation to have with people. And even though I've had mental health problems for 10 years, in fact it's actually 11, time disappears really quickly, I'm still not kind of completely used to it. I'm very used to listing off my diagnoses. I've been to so many doctor's appointments that I'm very sort of okay with that. That's not difficult. But actually talking about how I'm feeling, or talking about how I feel about my conditions, is much harder, because that really is about your feelings rather than kind of symptoms or facts. And yeah, that's the bit I really struggle with, because having mental health problems and being kind of prevented from doing the things that you want to be doing with your life is really hard, and that pain doesn't go away. Like I'm nearly at 4 years since I last worked, and that still hurts all the time I think about it. And so I don't think about it, but it does hurt every time I think about it, because it brings up lots of feelings. It makes me feel useless. It makes me feel resentful of other people who are able to do it. It makes me feel like I'm sort of defective in some way. And even though I know those things aren't true, that is how I feel. And actually being able to talk about that it's really helpful. Being able to kind of open up and let someone in and not be completely on your own with those fears and struggles and difficult feelings is so important, and all of you have the capacity to be able to do that with someone in your life. And one of the other tips I have is that opening up first often really helps, because if you've trusted someone else with kind of quite personal information, then they're much more likely to open up. And that's why I know about kind of the mental health status of so many of the people around me, because I blog about it, I talk about it, I'm quite open, and that's when people so often turn around and go, oh, me too, I've got depression, or actually for a while I had really bad anxiety, or my dad's got that, or my mum's got that, or my best friend's got that, and I'm really unsure of how to talk to her. What can I do? So these conversations they're just so important, and today is the day to start, but we must carry that on throughout the year, because it is 2018 and it is not okay that so many of us feel so embarrassed or ashamed or unable to talk about something that is so common. 25% of us at any one time, at least in the UK, has some sort of mental health problem, and that is too many people to not talk about it. It's becoming the norm, which is awful, and it shouldn't be the case, but it is becoming the norm to have been or be mentally ill, and we need to get talking about it. So I hope some of these tips have helped. Please do use them. If not today, tomorrow, the next day. Please start talking about mental illness, because you can't catch it. You're not going to get depression just because you've talked about it. You're not going to make someone feel worse. As long as you're understanding and sympathetic and you listen to them, then you're not going to make anything worse, and you might just make things better, because you never know when these people need to have these conversations. You never know whose life you might even save. Because mental illness lies to us. It tells us that we're not worth it, that we're rubbish people, and that no one cares, and we're the world would be a better place without us a lot of the time. And actually, by having a conversation, by showing us that you're happy to take time out of your day to talk to us about how we're feeling and to listen to our story and to how we're coping, can be the difference between us feeling suicidal and us deciding that today is not the day we die. So I hope that's kind of heartening to realise that you can make a really big difference with a 5-minute chat. Grab a cup of tea, some cake, pick up the phone, email, text, stick on a Facebook status, share my video, anything that might help open up the conversation, because you never know who needs it. And there have been so many times when I've had someone just reach out to me completely randomly and just say, oh, I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're doing. And it's reached me on a day when I'm feeling really, really low and I just kind of want to give up because I'm just done. And it really helps pick you up. So please do get the conversation started and let me know in the comments how those go. I'd really like to know. Obviously keep confidentiality, but please do let me know how that goes. And do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, because there'll be more videos sort of like this and about all sorts of other topics. So yeah, happy Time to Talk Day. I hope your conversations go really well, and hopefully you'll have a laugh and meet some new friends and find more allies. So yeah, thanks very much for watching and I'll see you soon. Bye!